So how long have you been in law enforcement now?
25 and a half years.
Okay. So now you said you're like you're a training officer, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So how long was you like, how long have you been doing that? I guess would be a better way to ask it.
So I started, I started as an officer in California.
Your whole career, I should be better.
Yeah. I started as an officer in California. I attended the academy the end of 1993 and graduated in 1994. Since then, I've kind of been in the work field and finding my way, around through the law enforcement community. I started actually teaching in 2000. And that's when I attended both a firearms instructor school, basic level school, and then I also went to an impact weapons, the ASP baton and straight stick baton. So those are the two things that I started first dealing with, teaching and gaining some more training time and expertise. And then since that time, I've expanded a lot of the training that I do over the years, and I teach 15 or so different topics that I've developed expertise in and got some instructor certificates in. Things like close quarter battle, vehicle close quarter battle. I teach report writing. I'm the department's lead de-escalation instructor and coordinator. I teach rifle schools, patrol operations, high-risk traffic stops. What else? I'm a force science advanced specialist. And then I've also had actually a very, I would say, privileged career. I've worked in a jail setting for a short time, patrol, spent about 19 years in investigations, the gang unit, street level and major narcotics, homicide, the U.S. Marshals violent offender team, FBI Safe Streets. I was a canine officer for a short time, SWAT team member, SWAT team leader, and a training coordinator. And now I'm an academy instructor.
Hey, so you said something about car combat. What is that?
So basically, when you look at contacts that officers make throughout the country, I would venture to say half of the contacts we make are either via traffic stops or in and around cars. So basically teaching officers how to work around cars, where the safe points of the car to operate are. There's, cars are built for two things. The first thing is obviously transportation, but the second thing is to absorb energy. So you look at traffic collisions, right? Mm-hmm. So the cars are designed with those impact ratings and everything else to absorb energy and hopefully provide some modicum of protection for the occupants inside. Well, it's no different than when rounds are being fired. Cars can absorb energy from a lot of the different levels of ammunition out there. And then where those rounds impact on the car also makes a big difference. So showing officers some safe ways if they're assaulted in or around vehicles, but more importantly, if they're outside and the assault comes from within a vehicle, how to utilize the vehicle and hopefully gain a tactical advantage.
So that was going to be one of my next questions too. When like do a traffic stop, and you said high level, so I guess you tell me how you feel is high level. But is there one particular side that you choose you're trained to go to, or is it just kind of your discretion?
You mean your approach?
Yeah, driver's side, passenger side. I've had it done so many different ways.
Yeah, so it's in my opinion, it's officer discretion. A lot of times the geography and or geometry of the stop may be a factor in which side you approach on. For example, if you're on a really busy road or an interstate, arguably it's a little safer perhaps to approach on the passenger side. Right. Normal stops, I've done both sides of the car. The most frequent is the driver's side approach. However, a lot of things that can factor into this as well. What's the traffic stop for? Do we know who it is? Is the driver and or passengers, are they trying to track us? Meaning, are they using the mirrors to try and track our movements? Are they trying to follow where we are? Are they looking around and trying to pinpoint our location? So when you look at potential pre-assault indicators and lanes of attack, that may also alter which side of the vehicle that you approach on, or when and even if you approach that vehicle, or if you utilize other options.
So for somebody to get stopped, should they go ahead and try to get their wallet, or wait for you to come to the car, or how do you prefer them to that?
So I would prefer, and I've done literally thousands of stops throughout my career. I would prefer that people just wait until I come up to the car and have their hands, up around the steering wheel where they're visible. I can explain the reason for the stop, what we need to accomplish, maybe what pieces of information I need, right? So the driver's license, the vehicle registration and insurance cards, and obtain that information. Oftentimes, phone numbers are required on the citations now. Some now they even want an email address, especially under COVID. There's a lot of things that are not handled in courtrooms now. So I can come up to the car and gain all that information. And then it really makes things go smoother, and we can have that conversation at the window. And when people start digging around in cars, it's very uncertain as to what they're doing. Oftentimes, and probably more often than not, people are looking for those items, driver's license, wallet, those kinds of things. But as frequently, or nearly as frequently, they could be hiding something as well, whether it's contraband or trying to obtain some sort of weapon. So really, the more cooperation that we get, just by being able to talk to people, keep hands visible, have a good verbal exchange with the driver and or passengers, it really speeds up the contact for those people who are briefly detained for a traffic incident, and then it increases safety for everyone involved.
Okay, because I got stopped one time, and I just waited for him to get up there, and he said, "Yes." He said, "Do you have any weapons on you?" I said, "Yeah, I've got a .380 Colt in my right front pocket." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Do you want me to get my license?" He said, "Yeah, but don't move around." I'm like, "So which one you want? Because I don't want to get shot, man. For you think I'm reaching, moving around too quick." So that's why I asked that, because usually I got one on me, so I'd rather them know, or I want them to know, but I don't want to be reaching around. So when you first traffic stop, it's just a regular traffic stop, and you pull somebody over, or you get out, or your senses already heightened. I mean, you're bracing yourself, or you try to be relaxed, or what's going through your mind when you stop somebody?
So, yeah, I try, and I think most officers do try and remain fairly relaxed. I think some of the determining factors where an officer's demeanor can be, maybe a little heightened, or they can be maybe a little louder, are those stops where there is a known risk. So maybe it's a high risk stop. There's some known information about the occupant or occupants within the vehicle that is available to the officers. They're going to initiate a traffic stop, and this information that they have, perhaps that this person is armed and left a crime scene, or there was a crime scene that just occurred and the vehicle matches. So then those are all indicators. But for the most part, I know we teach and we strive to keep things at a very low conversation level, even those heightened risk stops, so that we don't really jack everybody up, if that makes sense. We don't want everybody's their thoughts, emotions, and behavior to be distorted or elevated where we're not making rational decisions. And I think that's on all parties that are involved with these stops. So we really strive and teach that remaining calm, giving good, clear commands, being direct with people, telling them the why. You know, the number one thing on traffic stops and or citizen contacts is people want to know why. I'm a big proponent. Hey, this is who I am. You know, I'm Officer Cvitanov with the police department, and the reason I stopped you is here's the why.
Okay.
And a lot of times, you know, even if they disagree, most of the traffic stops, okay, I understand you have your opinion. It's not that big of a deal. Here's what I need from you right now. And that's generally those 3 articles: the driver's license, registration, insurance. And then at that point, go back to the vehicle and determine what's going to happen. Is it going to be a verbal warning? Is it going to be a written warning? Are we going to issue a citation to appear in court?
So how do you decide that? Is it how they treat you, or I mean, they have had numerous infractions, or having a bad day?
Yeah. I at this point, nothing offends me. So I just, somebody can say, I don't, I guess I shouldn't say nothing, but most things don't bother me. Though I'm not a big citation person. I try and give people a lot of credit, as well as my opinion of traffic stops, just the general stop, right? So let's say speeding. My opinion of what law enforcement's goal is and should be is to correct behavior. Meaning, if I come up to the door and I tell the driver, this is, you know, I'm Officer Cvitanov. Reason I stopped you is, you know, you were 10 miles or 12 miles over the speed limit. And so that's the reason for the stop. And they go, hey, sorry, you're right. I wasn't really paying attention. You know, I'm on my way to work. I'm late, or I'm going to pick up my kids. Okay. So in that situation, when somebody is cooperative, number one, and then 2, they're like, yep, you know, there's no, I wasn't doing this or that. Well, that, in my opinion, a lot of times that in itself is their recognition of it will help correct behavior. And what I mean by that is, if they're aware of it and then they're going to notice it, and maybe this contact, especially if it's a positive contact, will ring in their mind for a little while and their driving habits will improve. The other thing is, I don't believe in being a hypocrite. I drive probably 5 to 10 miles an hour over the speed limit often. And I generally I honestly can't think of a time speed wise where I will stop a person under 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. So I think the goals are to be fair, as well as to understand what the overall goal is, and that's to correct driver behavior and to make the streets safer. And if I can do that at a low level via verbal warning or written warning, that is my preferred methods to try and resolve the traffic stop.
Okay, so let's go a little bit further for that, because let me ask you, because I had a stop one time. I was by a deputy. He comes up and he didn't ask for anything. Says, step out of the vehicle. I said, okay. So I step out, takes me to the back, pats me down, goes start searching the vehicle, comes back and said, do you have any weapons in the car? I said, yeah, there was a 38 revolver in the side and pat. So he runs up there and grabs it and starts calling the serial number. I said, putting my hands on the car. I said, hey, deputy, do you want to see my license and my concealed carry? So he stops calling the serial number, goes to search the vehicle again, pats me down, goes, he said, tell me where the drugs are at, or I'm going to call the dog. I said, well, call the dog. You searched me and searched the vehicle. And he said, so I said, can I go? And he said, where are you going? I said, buy some tires over here. So I had 2 back ones that was out. And he said, yeah, you're free to go. And I said, well, why did you stop me? He said, because you didn't have a seatbelt on. I said, so you're not even going to run me or drive license or anything? Why'd you pat me down? And he said, this is a non-drug area. I was like, wait a second, you can just do that? So what's the protocol there? Like, I mean, is that when you pull somebody over and you go and want to search the vehicle? I mean, what reasons do you have to have? And I mean, what constitutes, I guess what I'm asking, what constitutes an illegal or an illegal search?
Sure.
Sorry, I took a long time to answer that.
So the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution relates to the reasonableness of search and seizure. And there are cases that come out of state courts, federal appellate courts, as well as the United States Supreme Court every year related to searches and seizures. And so there's a lot of detail that goes into it, but essentially what the Constitution says is each person has the right to be secure in their persons, places, things, and effects. So that would mean in your home, as a person walking down the street, in your vehicle, without unreasonable government intrusion or searches and seizures taking place. That includes arrest, because arrest is a seizure. So when I'm posed with these questions, and I've taught some classes with prosecutors on these types of scenarios, the first answer is always, well, it depends. And the reason I say that is the fact pattern of the particular contact and case and what's known to the officers at the time is what's relevant in each individual case. So let's just say this fact pattern that you just gave me. So it was a traffic stop for, I'm writing some notes here, seatbelt violation, which is an infraction in most states. And then I want to make sure I get it accurate. So the officer asked you to step out.
Yeah.
And you complied.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you step out, and then what happened after that?
He walked me to the back of the vehicle, told me to put my hands on the trunk. So I complied. He patted me down, then went through the vehicle. Not really a thorough search, I would say. Came back and asked me if I had any weapons or drugs in the vehicle. I said, yeah, there's a .38 revolver in the panel of the driver's door. Okay. He found that, came back, started calling the serial number. And I said, hey, deputy, you want to see my concealed carry permit and my license? And he stopped about halfway through calling it in. Since the weapon back on top of the vehicle, came back, started patting me down again, and then did a thorough search of the vehicle. And then came back and told me to give him the drugs or he was going to call the dog. And I said, well, call the dog. I don't have any drugs. And he said, where are you going? And I said, to buy some tires. And I said, I'm cutting through here. And he said, okay. And I said, can I go? And he said, yes. And I said, well, why did you stop me? He said, because you have a seatbelt on. I said, so you patted me down for that? You're not even going to, now you're not even going to run my driver's license?
Okay. So based on this fact pattern that you've given me, my opinion is that the search probably was not good for these reasons. So for an officer to essentially take an exception to the search warrant requirement, which in under the Fourth Amendment, they're to be able to reasonably search somebody's persons, places, things, or effects, it requires one of a couple of things. First is a search warrant. And that's a document where details are provided to a judge. The judge reads what the officer has provided and determines whether or not there is there is probable cause for the officers to go search a person's vehicle, a person, or their house, let's say. But you need one of those things. You need reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or an exception to the search warrant requirement, which would be something like exigency. I've got to get in your house because there's a hostage and I'm not going to wait for a search warrant. I've got to get in there and save somebody. You're in a medical emergency and I need to force entry on one of your doors to get in and gain access into your house. So there's some exceptions to that search warrant rule, but absent those exceptions, a search warrant or one of the other factors, so consent being another one, then most work, all other searches are found to be just by general rule unreasonable. And it's in the fact pattern you gave, things were, in my opinion, were a little bit out of order. Meaning, obviously, if you have a concealed weapons permit, and I've living in the Midwest, in the state I live, I've contacted countless people who have concealed weapons permits. In our state, as in most, the responsibility is on them, and it's a condition of their concealed weapons permit to notify an officer that they have a permit and they are carrying. Those are generally the guns I'm not worried about, the known guns, right? People telling me, hey, by the way, I'm carrying a gun. I have a permit. Here's my permit with my driver's license. And, you know, my partner, one of my partners says it best. Hey, let's do this. You keep your gun where it is. I'll keep mine in my holster. We'll all get along. And, you know, you get a little chuckle just like that. And then you kind of ask him, you know, so what are you carrying? And, you know, depending on the quality of the gun, you may get another chuckle out of that. But those are the guns that I'm not as worried about. I'm more worried about the guns that I don't know of, right? People are hiding. Nonetheless, to get back to the fact pattern that you gave, just because an area is in and of itself a high crime area, there has to be more. That in and of itself does not give me the ability to stop any vehicle for an infraction, traffic infraction, or a misdemeanor infraction, to being able to remove somebody from the vehicle, pat them down, search them, and search their vehicle with nothing more to articulate why this search would be reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. And that's how those are evaluated: is what's the reasonableness of this search? Is it reasonable? What's the fact pattern here? And with these facts, is a search warrant required? Is consent required? Or are one of the exceptions to the search warrant requirement required here for this search to be valid?
I think I've been thinking, how did that work with that stop and frisk Giuliani had up there in New York? Was that legal, or did
it depends? Depends again on the situation, how the officers, what facts they have to articulate a reasonableness to be able to detain a person and frisk them. Giuliani, before being the mayor, was a federal prosecutor and understood the Fourth Amendment very well. Probably prosecuted many cases where evidence from a search was trying to be suppressed. So, you know, federal prosecutors and prosecutors in general all are, in my opinion, in some form or another, have expertise in the Fourth Amendment and the suppression of evidence based on searches that took place, and that they have to be able to defend that to a judge on how this officer obtained this evidence was reasonable under the Fourth Amendment.
Okay.
So there's no clear-cut answers on every case across the board when it comes to search and seizure. Each case is based on the facts of that particular context. So even when I teach people about this and have been a training officer, there's a lot of, especially younger cops, they'll read new opinions that come out of it's called case law, that come out of the various courts, and they've come up to me and said, hey, did you read this case? And no, what's that case? And so they'll say, oh, here's what it said, and so you know we can go do this. That's not what the case says. Well, yeah, it is. Read it. Okay. So I read it. I said, now, what the judges have said here is, based on this exact fact pattern, this was reasonable. But if you change a fact or two in here, that could make this unreasonable. These are guidelines. It's okay. It's a way to get officers to understand what may be reasonable, and then based on these facts, what I tell people is there's a lot of gray area, and you've got to look at the facts independently and not rely on any one factor in the case to either say that something is a violation of the Fourth Amendment or it isn't. It's the totality of what took place and the ability for the officers to articulate the reasonableness of it.
When you said that about the weapons, that made me laugh. I remember reading this thing. This officer stopped this old woman, 80s. He was surprised to her concealed carry permit. Asked her what she had. Said 9mm. Said something about her body language. Made a mess again. She had a 45. And the last one, she said, "Do you have anything else?" She said, "Yeah, 38." He goes, "What are you scared of?" She said, "Not a damn thing."
Exactly. I saw that one too.
I thought that was great. So that leads me to the next thing. That YouTube is I'm watching pretty graphic things on there. Sometimes I wish I hadn't seen them, but I seen one the other day, a officer, he went up to the passenger side door, and the driver, he noticed a weapon on him, told him to just step out for my safety, and the officer just, I don't know what he did, just took his eyes off of him. And I mean, you seen the shooting, he shot the cop, so, and then he got gunned down by a suicide by a cop or whatever. So I guess it's a long way back. How many police officers do you have on the street? I mean, that actually something turns violent in an alter, something like that. I mean, 'cause he just got the drop on it. I mean, I don't know if he took his eyes off of him. I mean, I just, I was like, why did you do that?
Well, I will tell you this, that, there are people throughout their career, police officers, sheriffs, federal agents, whomever, corrections officers. There are times in every cop's life where I think levels of complacency set in, right? Especially if you're making, let's say you're a traffic officer, you're a state trooper, and your essential day-to-day job tasks are traffic stops, forcing the traffic laws. And like anything, you have hundreds, if not thousands of them that go the same all the time. And, there's thankfully, there wasn't a threat to you as an officer. But there's that one, and here we go. So sometimes, complacency or just mental error, where you're not continually assessing a person's levels of compliance. And so we are big proponents, the group that I teach with, on continual compliance checks. And those could be very small things, very just verbal questions, coordinated with maybe verbal direction on things to do or not do. And each one of those in and of itself is a separate compliance check. And the more compliance you get, then you kind of determines, how this contact may play out. No different than how little compliance you get. And I'm not so worried about the person telling me to F off or something like that. I'm looking at a combination of things. But just because there's initial compliance doesn't mean, so if I go up to the side of the vehicle, I get license, registration, insurance, person's angry, but that's not uncommon on many traffic stops. So I go back to my car. What we propose is, and what we teach, there's a whole new secondary set of compliance checks when you reapproach that vehicle, because that time span in between, people can make a lot of bad or irrational decisions and formulate plans. What I will say is that it appears, and based on some of the data that I've seen over the last 2 to 3 years, that attacks on officers are escalating at dramatic percentage levels. More officers are being challenged more regularly. People are less afraid. We can get into all of the reasons of why that's taking place, and there are many, and many of those reasons, center around, in my opinion, some propaganda that's being placed out there, this defund the police movement, and things that police officers are continually doing, which are factually incorrect and proven by data that they are incorrect. But in and of itself, yes, there's a lot more of these incidents taking place. And so there should be heightened awareness from law enforcement officers when they're making traffic stops and working in or around vehicles.
So yeah, you said bring up a good question about defund the police. We've seen that all over the place. The instances that we get shown on TV. I mean, there has to be thousands more that happened that didn't end badly. I mean, because I hate when people say, "Oh, there's good cops and bad cops," because that makes it sound like half are good and half are bad. When it's probably only like just a small percentage that this happens with. Would that be correct? I mean,
so great. That's a great question. Have there been bad cops? Are there some out there? There's roughly at any given time about 800,000 sworn officers, the federal, state, and local levels throughout the United States at a given time. 800,000. You put 800,000 of any profession in a room, yes, there will be some that aren't, let's say, cream of the crop, or make bad decisions, or aren't there for the right reasons. And any cop or anybody from another profession who says that that's not true is, in my opinion, irrational. It's unfortunate, but I'll be the first to tell you, other cops don't want those people around. They don't want them in the profession. No different than there are bad doctors, there are bad lawyers, there are bad clergy, there are bad bosses, there are bad politicians. Now, you want to talk about high percentage, there you have it. I mean, that's astronomically high, right? But as far as bad police officers, that is a drum that's being beaten out there, that is driving this movement. But again, those that are doing it, in my opinion, they're the ones who yell loudly, and when you start giving them fact, then they just scream louder, or they pout and turn away. Because what they don't want is, they don't want the true numbers. They don't want the true data. They don't want to see that overall law enforcement does an exceptional job in this country, that the overall uses of force are minimal throughout this country, that the number of officer-involved shootings versus the number of calls for service and citizens encounter each year are 0.0000%. It is not even a full percent.
Wow.
However, let's look at what's the third leading cause of death in the United States?
Oh, I don't know.
How about errors in emergency rooms?
Really?
By medical professionals. So where are we on the TV every night with that?
I would never have guessed that right there.
Yeah. No, you know why? Because doctors are human beings, just like lawyers, just like school teachers. Oh, that's right. Cops are too, right? Law enforcement are human beings. Human beings make errors. Human beings,
that's a lot better too, though, right?
have thoughts, emotions, and behavior, not only related to the job, but in their personal lives as well. And what the loud folks tend to believe is that the human beings in their world don't make errors. Well, again, it's irrational, it's nonsensical, and all it does is create further divide rather than have true discussion. There's not a cop out there that I know of, and certainly trainers, who aren't arguing every day to upper command for additional training, for more training for the officers on their departments and in their bureaus. But let's look at the defund the police movement. What is one of the first things cut from the agencies in the United States, and some of them large, vis-a-vis the Los Angeles Police Department? What are some of the first things that were cut in the defund the police movement?
I don't remember the first ones that was cut.
How about training?
Training.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now we have people complaining and bitching and moaning that police aren't trained enough. They're not trained well enough. They don't know what they're doing. And then we defund them. And the first thing we do is we cut training. Why? Training is expensive. Training takes manpower. So here's the other problem. When you're a leader of an agency, you're trying to get your officers to handle calls that are in a computer on a call board as quickly as possible. You don't want your constituents or your citizens to wait, especially with emergency calls, right?
Mhm.
So I've got an obligation to fulfill calls for service. Then I have investigations to follow up on. And I have a number of detectives with caseloads. And then I've got other obligations, traffic enforcement, and then training and what needs to be trained, what is required in the state by the states that have to be trained to the officers each year. How much time in each area of those subjects do we have to dedicate to training? So I'm trying to fulfill all these obligations while maintaining staffing. Well, if I have people in for training, then I'm pulling them off their normal job duties, which is reducing staffing levels, and I'm putting them over here in the training cadre. Okay, fine. That's a good thing, in my opinion. And there's got to be some give and take on both sides. Well, what does training also do? It costs a lot of money. You're either bringing instructors in, you're sending people in your agency to schools to gain more expertise, to get instructor certificates, to increase their expertise in a given discipline. And then many of those require materials, right? So whether it's firearms, it's simunitions, it's vehicle CQB where you close quarter battles, where you're building walls, arrest control tactics, the knife defense, weapon defense, on and on and on. That all costs money. And what do they want to do? They want to cut all the money. So the question then becomes, what do you want? When you call 911, what do you want? Do you want somebody who's trained, who can come to your house and be professional and help you out with whatever's going on in life that day? Or do you want somebody 6, 8, 10, 12 hours later, maybe a day later, because now you've defunded the police and it's reduced the number of the officers available to respond. And those officers, because you've defunded them, have far less training. So perhaps you're not getting the quality of officer that you would hope you would get, or that you think you deserve, but you want to do away with all that. So we're compounding all this, and then we just keep beating the drum about how bad things are, and we just disregard all of the statistic, facts, and evidence that refute those irrational claims.
We talk about training before I forget this, and I'm not arguing cause of death. People just say on Facebook, but the tactic that what Chauvin used, I've never seen that before. What was that?
Well, good question. Here's what I will say. I do some expert work as well related to use of force. I am very reluctant to offer opinions without knowing every detail that's available to make an educated opinion on an officer's use of force. What we see is generally snippets of video that are out there that are played by different media outlets. Now, on the Chauvin, we did see his a couple of angles with body cameras and or cell phone cameras, and it was a long time. But I was not able to watch the entire trial because I was working during the day. I did see some of the some segments of the trial by different experts who were on the stand, and some of the video. And what was determined was he did have a knee on George Floyd's neck for part of the time, but there was, if I remember correctly, a number of minutes where his knee was also on the top shoulder of Mr. Floyd. Now, I also heard that, and I believe it was in the trial, plus some of the other information that comes out, there was the toxicology reports of Mr. Floyd could have been a contributing factor. But, not knowing all of the evidence, I don't want to say one way or another. I don't want to defend anybody, nor do I want to prosecute anybody if I don't know all of the factors in the case. And I think that's how it should be. I think everybody's quick to rush to judgments and then find out later that the snippet of video, and certainly we, to clarify, we saw a lot in the George Floyd case. There were 9 minutes of video, which is a lot of video. But more often than not, it's a snippet or a segment, a few seconds long, and we're making all of the media and society makes their opinions based on that. And that's just that again makes no sense to me, because you're looking
at that tactic in particular, though. I'm sorry. That tactic he was using in particular, is that one that's taught? I've never seen that before.
So it's not something that I've ever taught.
Okay.
And I do teach the arrest control tactics as well. It's not something I've ever taught. Now, in a prone position, when we're initially gaining control of the suspect and getting them into handcuffs, there are times where we will put a knee on a person's back. Right. But once a person is in custody, meaning we have them in handcuffs, then at least what I teach, and I think what many teach, is we want to get a person up, rolled up onto their side, generally up and into the vehicle. Now, I do know that Mr. Floyd struggled significantly on the initial time they attempted to place him in the back of the police cruiser. Whether that would have happened the second time, nobody will ever know. I don't want to assume that he would or would not have complied. So there's a lot of what ifs here.
Right.
But again, the more I see and the more I study these cases, the more reluctant I am to say, well, this is what the officers should or shouldn't have done. Right. I will, if somebody asks me, is that something you teach or would do, then I'll give you an honest opinion. And that's not something I teach. And I don't think that I've ever done something like that. But I've been involved in a lot of arrests throughout my career, and it's just not something that I can recall that I've ever done.
Okay, because that was it. I'm not arguing whether it was correct or not, or how good of a person Chauvin or Floyd is. I mean, I'm sure from the thing I read about Mr. Floyd, a lot of it speaks for itself. I'm sure what was he full of? Fentanyl and amphetamines, I believe. Right. I'm not even. I guess it's fentanyl. Something just. Well, let's just tell us about drugs then. It just popped up because I never really heard about this till a couple of years ago, and people was telling me about that and something called Special K. That was a horse tranquilizer. I was like,
yeah, ketamine.
Yes. What's the biggest? And then I know about the opiates. So what's the biggest drug problems out there?
Oh, well, I think a lot of it depends on geographically where you're located. Methamphetamine, I believe, still continues to be a pretty popular stimulant that's out there, probably the most popular. Obviously, heroin is still around, but I clearly over the last decade or longer, prescription opiates have become more and more popular among the population, and abuse of those opiates. I would obviously, the legalization of marijuana in several states throughout the country has in various opinions on that, but that continues to be probably the most popular is the marijuana. But fentanyl has made quite a push forward here, I would say, within the last 3 to 5 years. And what people don't know is that its level of toxicity and people overdosing and dying from the use is pretty dramatic. And the problem becomes, when it's an unregulated and it's not medically prescribed, you never know what you're truly getting. You never know the purity of what you're getting. You never know the percentage of what you're getting. Is it straight fentanyl? Is it mixed with something? Is there fentanyl in this joint, this marijuana cigarette? Have they been combined? So it's a very high risk drug to ingest, especially when it's not medically prescribed. And that's why, so some of the data I read, and I hope I don't misquote my numbers, but a medical use of fentanyl is 0.03 nanograms, if I remember correctly. And you talked about George Floyd, and he had, I believe it was 0.11 nanograms. So essentially a toxic level potentially. It's nearly 4 times what is medically prescribed. And that's, again, let me clarify, that's if my memory is correct and those numbers are accurate. And if not, I apologize, but that's what I recall reading. And so I just want to make that clear, is that something that I've read, and it's been a while ago. It was at least a year ago. And so I hope I didn't misquote my numbers.
Okay. Yeah. Cause, it seems like there's just more and more stuff just keeps coming on the scene with that. Because like I said, I never heard of it a couple of years ago, and people were telling me it was caused people to hallucinate and not know where they was at. And I was like, man, this sounds like some awful stuff. DUI arrest. How often? I mean, where I live at in Birmingham, or where I did live at in Birmingham, it was a little on the south side of district. And I don't know if it was because it was the entertainment district or what, but most everybody lived close to the bar. So unless you was like hit somebody or got belligerent with an officer, they didn't do DUIs. I mean, they'd like Blair Park or whatever. Back when I was drinking, was sending a text at a stop sign and got woke up with the knock and the light. And I was like, oh, dang. He goes, can you pull that vehicle? I mean, literally, I could throw a rock and hit my apartment. And he said, can you pull the vehicle in there? And I said, yes, sir. He said, all right, park and go inside. I was like, oh, thank God. And then I read about any place else, they got zero tolerance on it. So, how does that usually work? Or is that districts? The lady I heard, the captain, she used to say, don't sweat the small stuff. And for the most part, the Southside District didn't. So I guess my question is, like, on misdemeanors like DUI, stuff like that, is it officer's discretion or how does it work?
I would say over the last 20 years, with the increase of drivers on the road, the population appears to be getting a little younger. The number of cars that are out there, the number of people who have died in motor vehicle accidents related to drugs and/or alcohol being ingested and affecting their ability to safely operate a motor vehicle, that officer discretion in many cases has been, depending on your jurisdiction, has been taken away. It's pretty much as in the places that I've worked, it's pretty much a zero tolerance, meaning if somebody is under the influence, then you will do a DUI investigation, determine if that person is in fact under the influence and or incapable of safely operating a motor vehicle. And if so, then take the appropriate steps once that's determined.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I was thinking too, because every other place I've read about or seen, it's like zero tolerance on the DUIs. I get that was, like you said, with so many people on the streets, but that one particular district, I don't, they're very lenient on that. Let me do the next question. You said you worked in as a jailer for a while.
Yeah, for a little bit. Excuse me. Yeah, when I was with the sheriff's department in California, I did. Okay,
so I got several years ago. I got a DUI in Florida, and I should have took the initial. They hammered me with it. So I got this 2-part question first with it. So I thought about going all the way up and then violating probation, just doing the 2 weeks or 20 days in jail. And the defense law, one of the lawyers here I was talking to said, it was a misdemeanor, right? And he said, yeah. He goes, oh, well, he said, that would have just went in the NC, or that would have went in the NCIC. He said, so it would have just came up in Florida. He said, it would have pulled up in Alabama. so you should never went back. I said, what? He said, it would never pull. I said, why do you tell me that? And he said, probably they wouldn't have come and got you, and Birmingham would have held you. So one, is that true? And then second one is they had me in there like, I had a misdemeanor, and they got me in there for guys that went to prison for 20 years for violent crimes. Shouldn't those people be separated from each other?
So county jails are a bit of an anomaly. Obviously the prison system is just that. You're convicted of a felony crime, your sentence is longer than a year, so then you go to prison. And that's the way my understanding is in most states. But at the jail level, what you have is you could have people who have been convicted of and committed prior felony crimes, but they're in jail, a local county jail, awaiting trial on either a new charge or maybe a retrial from where they're coming back from the state prison that they're incarcerated. They're being held in the county jail for either an appeal or a retrial. So depending on how big the jurisdiction is, how big the county jail is, often the number of beds they have, the number of areas to isolate people or to separate people, those things all play into how they run their jail populations.
Okay, because I was like, man, I'm a nonviolent offender, and you got me people going away for them a long time here. So I was really wondering about that one.
There's just a lot of factors and that go into that, and it's going to be a jurisdictional issue, size of the jail, and number of beds, number of areas to have people housed, and so on.
Okay. Yeah. So it was like I said, I should have just did the original time. So, what about like problems there? You got there's a lot of fights in jails, or just riots, or any problems within the corrections officers?
Oh, I'm sure in every jail and prison there's fights. I mean, some are obviously have over the years risen to the level of riots within a custodial facility. But when you have people that are housed together, that are, in a set in a confined setting, you can't separate too far from one another. And every now and then, tempers are going to flare and you're going to have fights. I think over the last several years, there's been a lot of work on incarceration and people being incarcerated. Small things, giving people more yard time to exercise, time to work out that stored up energy, screening processes for people, intake classifications, where they can maybe look at an individual and determine if there's another group of people that this he or she may have problems with, whether it's a gang type thing, it's where they live, their tattoos, whatever the case may be. So you have these different factors that can be considered to house people more appropriately as well, and that's pretty commonly used.
Well, it must have been overcrowded or something in there, because I know by the time somebody came 7 hours and got me out, I got credit for 3 days, and then I got sentenced to 10, so it was gonna be like 6 nights, and the jailers they was processing me like, what? We got to keep me for 6. And they was trying to let me go then, because I guess they were just overcrowded. Like, we don't need him down here for 6 days. Like, hey, I'll go now if you but no, I did a 7. All right. So now the tough question, because the media shows it to us every night. All cops are just racist, right? Mm-hmm. It just draws them right into the police force.
Yeah, I find it absurd. plain and simple, and I'll explain why. Police officers worked within communities that are within their jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And I've worked for 2 very big departments, and big in the United States. So the average size department in the United States is right between 30, 40, 50 cops. So I've worked at an agency with 2,000, an agency with just over 900, an agency with 100. So all relatively big departments, not clearly not LAPD or New York or Chicago, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, very large departments. And within that, you have a very wide cross-section of people who reside within your jurisdiction. Many races, many cultures, many languages, many backgrounds. And I have personally not been around cops, and I've done this for nearly 26 years, that said, hey, tonight we're going to go out and we're going to target this group of people. It just, I haven't been around that. And I would say that most cops, if not a very, very large percentage, would say the same thing. We're not going to go target a specific group of people because of their race or ethnicity. Now, what we do is we target crime. We target areas of high crime. We target problem businesses, right? So maybe different hotels where we get prostitution complaints and or complaints of drugs being sold out of it. No different than some store where that is taking place. I've conducted surveillance on bars, on restaurants, on car shops, small grocery stores, you name it, all involved or have people involved in these offenses. And it had nothing to do with where they were located within the city, or who was working there, or who the alleged suspects were. Nothing to do with race or ethnicity. It was all based on information that was given to us, reported to us, suggested to us, or we linked it from another case, and then we went and worked that case. So the thought that officers even have time, when we have calls that are pending, that are holding most nights, because there's so many calls for service. It's interesting. Now that I'm working in training, we also do the in-service training for all of the officers who are on the department, as well as the new officers. And talking to, I teach a lot of the in-service as well, with the cops who have been on for a while. And every one of them is telling me the same thing is, we're short staffing all the time because, like everybody, we're seeing the biggest mass exodus of officers from the profession based on retirements, people leaving early, or people just quitting the profession. The inability to hire fast enough due to very low numbers of people applying, which I would suggest is a direct correlation to what media and certain groups of people have portrayed out there, the inaccurate information, and then things like this, that all police are biased and all of their decisions are made based on a person's race or ethnicity. Just things that are so factually flawed and untrue, but it has a dramatic impact. And one of those impacts is when you don't have people to respond to calls because you're short and calls are pending, you don't have free time. You don't have downtime to go out and do proactive policing. So crime is on the rise at historic levels throughout the country. Violent crime throughout our country is rising and has risen over the last year since a certain election took place at a historic level. Yet we want to blame the police and not the offenders. We want to blame anybody but those who are doing the crimes. And it is just an ugly cyclical effect that we have going on here that is, when you look at reason, it's absolutely absurd. there's such a lack of reason, as well as truth and factual statistical data that annihilate that argument. It's just, it's crazy. So I don't buy into it. I have never had a complaint working in 2 states related to a person's race. I never hope to, because, you know, just like the proposition that people are stopped based on race alone. I can tell you this, in most traffic stops, it is, you are not aware of the person's race generally up until you're either walking up to the vehicle or they've slowed down enough and perhaps they're looking into their the mirror on their door to look back for the officer, that you even see who's in that driver's seat and or passenger seat areas. And it was, you know, I saw it years and years ago, the first 7 years of my career. And an officer was on a stop, and I was the second officer who showed up, and the person in the vehicle was telling the officer, the only reason you stopped me was because of my race, and I'm going to leave the race out of it. And the officer said, okay, if you believe that, is that true? And the person said, yes, it is. He said, do me a favor. Can you step out? You're not in trouble. I just want you to step out of the vehicle and walk with me. And so the driver did, and they come back to the officer's vehicle. And as cars are driving down the roadway, as they're approaching, he would ask, what color is the driver of that car? Well, I don't know. Cars move. What color is the driver of that car? Well, I don't know. How about this car over here? So 3 to 4 cars, and the response was consistent each time. Well, I don't know. It's too fast. I couldn't tell. And he said, my point exactly. And this person got back in the car and said, okay. So reality sometimes is a bitch, right?
Yeah.
There are times where we don't like facts and provable data. We don't like what's really out there because it dissuades us from our argument and our whatever our passion is. And then somebody brings something up and they go, but what about all of this verifiable information? I don't want to hear about any of that. Now, are there bad cops? Have cops done that before? Sure they have. So have teachers. So have gas station attendants. So have bartenders. So have doctors, lawyers, judges, jurors, you name it. Is it acceptable? No, it's not. No, it's not. But this thought, what I would tell people is look at where the division truly is. Look at where it's coming from. Where's this generated? That should tell you the story.
So you said you did a lot of surveillance. I got a good question for you. I know, oh God, having my sister, some guy she was mixed up with, and then several people. I know one guy was actually a neighbor, and he had all these cameras set up, and he went out of town and watched the SWAT team kick his doors in. When you're looking at, how long does an investigation take before they make an arrest? I mean,
on what kind of crime?
Like say all right, say you're doing surveillance on like the guy who I said watched his doors get kicked in. For some reason, I guess luck was on his side because he didn't. But he was they kicked his door in for drugs, and he just watched it on a camera in New Orleans or wherever he's at, and there was nothing there. And you know, I thought, or that's how how long does an investigation like that take before they finally make go in and get somebody? Because
it depends. Every case is, I've been on hundreds of them, and every case is different. Some are going to be much more long-term investigations. Others, perhaps you can do it in a matter of a week or 10 days. It really depends. And there's various factors that go into it. One thing I'm not a huge proponent of in several of these kinds of discussions that I've had is I'm not a big proponent of giving up police investigative tactics and specifics, but suffice to say that there's a wide range of times. I've been involved in investigations that have gone up to a year because of the complexity and the number of people involved, and that it continued to grow and the amounts continued to grow. So we let the investigation go longer. And I've also had some that have lasted literally a couple of quick buys and we're done.
Okay, because one of these got some guy had messaged me on Facebook a while back. So my sister had been keeping his car or something, so he just got out of jail, and he was telling me the guy had got it from, had him meet him in 2 cities over, and then he took him home. Then he got arrested. I was like, "You not stupid? I mean, are you that stupid? The guy's got cops going around, circling around his house, and you go do?" I said, "You deserve to go to jail if you're doing something that dumb, man." I mean, the way I remember the story is, that guy meets him in like 12 miles away, and then asks him, can he take him back home? And then he bonds out first. I was like, how long did it take you to start putting all this together? What's happening here, man? Because then I had to put my car in the shop the other day, and somebody told me that guy had been in jail too, and I was like, oh God, maybe when are you going to learn? So let's see if I got. I was trying to think if I had anything else. I mean, what would you tell? I'll close out. What would you tell somebody when the police stop you? We went through that, and we've touched the officers. I think that's all the questions I have there.
Okay.
That I can really think of. Because we didn't want to go. Oh yeah. There was one that I wanted to ask you a while ago. Slipped my mind. I heard you talk about pistol, firearm, hand-to-hand, knife. I mean, how many different types of combat training and you go through, and how long is it?
I've been training off and on for probably the last 20 years, various different styles, and then also the different weapons. So knife defense, weapon defense, handgun retention, takeaways, all of those things. There are various places around the country that and schools that teach it. I am actually a lead instructor for one here in the Midwest. I think that is probably, and full disclosure, I'm one of the lead instructors, but it took us 5 years to really put the comprehensive program together. And I think it's arguably the best in the nation, without a doubt. And we base it on human behavior, science. Everybody that has that teaches for us has been through several classes on human behavior, decision-making time, how the brain works, how people function. And we apply that to the tactics that we use. We use things that are very rudimentary, that don't take high levels of skill, meaning 3, 4, 5 years to master something. And we've put a very, very sound program together. Also looking at the officer and officer personal ability to calm themselves, to sleep better. We have a nutrition component. We have a sports psychologist that is on staff, a full-time nutritionist. We're certified by a doctor that's an orthopedic surgeon here. We do expert testimony as well. The company is called Complete Tactical Consultants, and it's the Tactical Athlete Program. And I would ask people to check that out, look at our website. Any questions, give us a call or an email. We respond to all those. And the other nice thing is what we've created is every single technique or every component of our class has its own separate video. So if you have a department with several, let's say, arrest and control instructors, oftentimes people, after they go to a class, they come back and they don't all teach the same tactic consistently. There's some tweaks that come on. Well, we actually have a video for every single tactic that shows it by the numbers. So not only do you have consistency within your program with your instructors, any one of your officers can pull it up on the website, look at it. They can train. They can do their own continued training and really become more proficient within the disciplines and understanding of what the components are to things. So We've gone the extra mile. We've put literally thousands of hours. We had a department that we beta tested it in for 2.5 years to refine everything that we did. And so it's at a level now where we think it's the best in the country.
When you said that, mentioned rifles a while ago, that got me thinking. I moved a while back, and I've got several, rifles, 22s all the way up. And so my friend said, "Well, why?" He said, "Why are you waiting so long?" I said, "Well, I'm waiting for it to get dark." And he said, "Well, why?" He said, "You're illegal." I said, "Yeah, but if the police get a call about a white man with a bunch of rifles and ammunition," I said, "they're probably going to come out there and check it out, whether it's legal or not."
And where were you going to do this?
Oh, I was moving from one house to the next, and I said, "I'm just going to wait till it gets dark and put the rifles in my car." I said, if the police get a call, the white man with a bunch of ammunition and rifle, and he's the guy asked me, he said, "What's?" He said, "I want to get a pistol for myself." I said, "What's the best you think?" I said, "Look," I said, "what I would suggest you get is get a 38 5-shot lightweight." I said, "You just point and shoot, and then you learn how to use it." Goes out and buys this gawky weapon that looks like it's going to shoot a 50 caliber, and it's a 22 round. I was like, "Man, you got the stopping power." And I tried to explain to him the different calibers, like, that is not what you need. Now you've got a semi-automatic that you do not know how to use, and somebody who probably need a firearm anyway, they're going to take it away from him. But I think it was. What's your opinion on that as far as the 38? That was what I was getting around to. It's
yeah, great caliber, great gun. What I tell people is that having been an instructor now for over 20 years in firearms, is a lot of it is personal preference. And so I give people some opinions of at least different makers that I prefer. But in the end, I tell them, you've got to go with something that is comfortable for you, that fits your hands and your eyes well, meaning when you bring the gun up to your eyes and you're finding your sight alignment, your sight picture, the grip to slide angle ratio on guns is different on each one. So it can make a difference. And so, a lot of it's just going to be personal preference, personal comfort. And I'm not going to tell somebody what to carry. I don't believe in that, as long as it's not junk.
Yeah. And I didn't even look at the brand on this, so I couldn't believe it. I mean, what wasn't what this particular person needed. Say Elizabeth, because I told them, this is all you need. You don't know anything about them. You don't, you're just buying it because you're afraid of the situation that you're in, which you need to get out of. Unfortunately, that seems to happen to a lot of people that I was friends with over the years. And they're still with us. I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to ask.
All right.
And thanks a lot for doing this with me. So I've been trying to find somebody, for an officer to come ask for that, because I've had instances with, where I've had to with police officers. All mine have always ended up good. I mean, it was but I just wanted to kind of dispel some of the myths that are out there that we see every night, because that's all you see on the news every night. So officer shooting, and you never hear about the ones that get killed every day.
Right. Well, I appreciate the invite and good conversation. And if something comes up down the road, just reach out and let me know.
Okay, and I'm sending you a link to something. I don't know if you've ever watched these with some of the stops. Have you ever watched these First Amendment audit videos?
Occasionally. Yeah.
There's one guy I watch in particular. He's probably my favorite one. He's I think he's a retired state trooper, and he goes through these things and he starts quoting he's funny to watch. I mean, he's my favorite one. Some of the other ones aren't good, but him and a defense lawyer ride together and go through these. I don't know how they find these. There's that many checkpoints every day, but he's probably my favorite one. There's no telling how much money he's making with 40,000 subscribers on YouTube either.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. But are you a Nebraska fan?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm more of a college sports fan.
Okay.
So I do that. I follow a few teams that I've been to several college games throughout the country over the last 20 years. And so I have spots that I really like and follow several teams.
So, Roll Tide down here.
Yeah, been there, love it.
You been to Bryant Denny?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Any other ones in the South you've been to? Baton Rouge?
So I've been to LSU, Alabama.
Oh, wow.
I've been to Texas a couple of times. Let's see where else. Obviously Nebraska, Iowa State, Tennessee. Oh,
You've been to some great ones, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a few others that we've done over the years. Several Pac-10 schools. So yeah, we've had some really good. I think next year we're going to try Notre Dame.
Oh, that would be awesome right there to go to Notre Dame. Yes, it would. But yeah, I took up enough of your time. Sorry, it took us an hour to figure that out.
No problem, brother.
Because I would have probably still been there doing it, but so she recorded that, right?
Yeah, I did, and I will send it to you here shortly.
All right, thanks a lot, officer, and you have a great afternoon.
You too. Bye.
Okay.